I need to start this one by being straight with you about something, because it's exactly the kind of thing that erodes trust in tech coverage. If you've searched around recently and found videos warning you about a hard May 20th Windows 10 lockdown, I want you to know something important before we go any further. That date came and went months ago, and the wall a lot of creators warned you about didn't actually land the way it was described. But before you feel relieved and close this tab, I need you to understand what actually happened instead. Because the real story, the one unfolding right now in mid-July 2026, is genuinely more important than the original warning, and almost nobody is covering it properly. Here's the honest, corrected timeline. Windows 10 officially hit end of support on October 14th, 2025. That part everyone got right. Microsoft then offered a bridge program, extended security updates, ESU, giving consumers 1 additional year of critical patches for free if you synced your PC settings, for 1,000 Microsoft rewards points, or for a flat $30. That program was originally set to close permanently on October 13th, 2026. That was the real deadline everyone was building urgency around back in the spring. Then, quietly, in late June 2026, Microsoft did something that almost nobody expected. According to Windows Latest's reporting, and independently confirmed on Microsoft's own support documentation, the company extended the consumer ESU program by an entire additional year, pushing the actual cutoff to October 12th, 2027. If you're already enrolled, your coverage extended automatically, no action required. Microsoft even sent out a notification email with the subject line, "Stay secure for another year," an email that, according to PC World's coverage from just this past week, a lot of people never saw because it landed in a folder most people never check. So the ground genuinely shifted under this entire story, and I think you deserve to know that shift happened, rather than me pretending the original countdown is still ticking exactly as first described. Now here's why I'm still calling this urgent, and I want you to actually sit with the reasoning here, rather than just trusting me on tone alone. Because the extension changes the calendar, but it does not change the 2 things that actually determine whether your computer is safe, whether you're enrolled, and what's currently being discovered in the wild. And on both of those fronts, the news from just this week should genuinely get your attention. Yesterday, July 14th, 2026, Microsoft released its July Patch Tuesday, and according to Bleeping Computer, Malwarebytes, and CrowdStrike's independent analysis, all published within the last 24 hours, this was the single largest Patch Tuesday in Microsoft's history. Different security vendors count it slightly differently depending on methodology, but the range sits between 570 and 622 vulnerabilities patched in one release. 59 of them rated critical, 2 actively exploited 0 days, 1 in Active Directory Federation Services, 1 in SharePoint Server, both already added to CISA's Known Exploited Vulnerabilities catalog, meaning attackers were using these before a patch existed. Microsoft itself attributed part of this unprecedented volume to a new AI-powered vulnerability discovery system the company recently deployed, actively hunting for flaws across the entire Windows codebase before threat actors find them first. Here's the number that actually matters for you if you're running Windows 10 right now. According to Bleeping Computer's breakdown of this, same release, approximately 300 of those roughly 570 vulnerabilities specifically affect Windows 10 version 22H2. 300. In a single month. And whether you receive the fix for any single one of them comes down to exactly one binary question. Are you enrolled in ESU or are you not? Microsoft did release the companion patch, KB5099539, for ESU enrolled Windows 10 machines, carrying those same July fixes. If you're not enrolled, none of that protection reaches you. Full stop, regardless of what the calendar says about October 2027. So here's the corrected, honest framing of everything you need to understand about this moment. The panic-inducing May 20th lockdown, framing that some coverage used earlier this year was based on a deadline that Microsoft has since moved. That's good news, genuinely. You likely have more runway than you were originally told. But more runway is not the same thing as safe, and the release that dropped less than 48 hours ago with 300 fixes specifically for Windows 10 machines and 2 0 days already being actively exploited before anyone had a patch is proof that the threat landscape isn't waiting for anyone's calendar. Being unenrolled in ESU right now, in July 2026, with this week's disclosure fresh, is a meaningfully worse position than being unenrolled was back in May. So over the next 3 sections, I want to walk you through exactly where you actually stand today, what your real options are, whether that's the free upgrade path, a completely legitimate workaround for older hardware, or moving off Windows entirely, and a specific no-nonsense action plan you can execute this week, not eventually. If you've been putting this off because you thought the deadline already passed you by, or because you assumed you had until some date next year to even think about it, stick with me. because the actual picture is more layered than any single headline captured. And I want you walking away from this video with total clarity instead of another vague warning. Let's get into exactly where things stand. All right, let's get into the actual decision tree, because I promised you clarity, not more anxiety. And the good news is that your options here are genuinely more concrete than most coverage makes them sound. Step 1, before anything else, open your start menu right now and type PC Health Check. Run it. Within about 30 seconds, it will tell you definitively whether your specific machine officially qualifies for a free, in-place upgrade to Windows 11. If it says yes, your decision is basically already made for you. Go to Settings, then Windows Update, and start that upgrade today, not this weekend, not after you finish this video. Windows 11 in July 2026 is also, frankly, in a noticeably better state than it was even a year ago. Microsoft has spent the last several months walking back a lot of the AI clutter that frustrated users throughout 2025, and recent updates have brought back genuinely requested features like a movable taskbar, indefinite update pause controls, and real performance improvements. The moment you're on Windows 11, you're back inside full support, receiving every one of those monthly patches automatically, including whatever comes out of Patch Tuesdays, like the one we just talked about from this week. But here's where it gets complicated for a very large number of people, and this is the part most coverage still glosses over. Independent estimates, including analysis from Canalys, put the number of PCs currently excluded from the official Windows 11 upgrade path somewhere in the range of 200 to 240 million machines, specifically because of the TPM 2.0 and processor generation requirements. And Microsoft has been completely unambiguous about this. The company has repeatedly and publicly restated that it has no plans to lower Windows 11's minimum requirements, calling TPM 2.0 a non-negotiable standard going forward. So if PC Health Check comes back with bad news, or if typing tpm.mfc into your start menu doesn't show TPM 2.0 ready to use, you're in that excluded group. And Microsoft's official position on what you should do about it is essentially buy new hardware. Before you accept that answer, though, do one thing that a genuinely significant number of people skip entirely. Restart your computer and press whatever key your manufacturer uses to enter BIOS or UEFI settings, usually F2, F12, or delete. Once inside, look for a section labeled Security, Advanced, or Trusted Computing, and look specifically for an option called Intel PTT, AMD, FTPM, or TPM State. A meaningful number of retail motherboards from 2017 onward actually ship with this hardware capability physically present, but switched off by default. Enable it, save your settings, restart, and run PC Health Check again. I want to be direct about this because it's a genuinely common situation. Some of you watching this right now are one BIOS toggle away from qualifying officially, and you don't even know it yet. If that doesn't resolve it, and your machine's processor still falls outside Microsoft's supported list, roughly Intel's 8th generation and newer, or AMD Ryzen 2000 series and newer, there is a legitimate, well-documented, openly available path forward. And I want to walk through it honestly, rather than with vague warnings. The tool is called Rufus. It's free, open source, and its code is fully publicly auditable. As of this month, the current stable release sits at version 4.13, and it remains, according to multiple current technical reviews, published just in the last 2 weeks, the simplest available way to create Windows 11 installation media that bypasses the TPM 2.0 secure boot and RAM checks. You download the official Windows 11 ISO directly from Microsoft's own servers. You download Rufus, you select the ISO, and Rufus presents a dialog called the Windows User Experience, with checkboxes to remove the requirement for 4GB plus RAM, secure boot, and TPM 2.0, along with an option to skip the mandatory Microsoft account sign-in during setup. The entire process of creating the bootable media takes roughly 7 to 9 minutes according to recent benchmarking, faster than most comparable tools. I do want to flag one honest caveat here, because accuracy matters more to me than a clean pitch. There was a minor bug reported in an earlier Rufus release, version 4.14, back in the spring, where the bypass checkbox settings didn't always persist correctly between sessions. It was a preference memory issue, not a broken bypass, and it's been addressed in the current stable build. I mention it specifically because if you read an older forum thread while researching this yourself, you might come across confused reports about it. And I want you walking in with the full current picture rather than stumbling on outdated panic. Microsoft's own official position is that devices which don't meet the minimum requirements are not guaranteed to receive updates going forward, and that installing this way is done entirely at your own risk. The honest current community consensus, based on continuous real-world use throughout 2026, is that security patches and cumulative updates have continued arriving normally on bypassed installations, including this week's massive July release. But there's no long-term guarantee written anywhere that this will always remain true, and you should go in understanding that distinction clearly rather than being surprised by it later. There's also one hard technical flaw worth knowing before you commit any time to this path. Recent Windows 11 feature updates require your processor to support the SSE 4.2 and PopKinty instruction sets, and there is currently no known bypass for that specific requirement. Practically speaking, if your machine predates roughly 2012 or 2013, even the Rufus route may not get you to a stable, update-receiving Windows 11 installation, and you're better served looking at a genuinely different path entirely. So where does that leave the people whose hardware simply can't make the jump, no matter which bypass they try? That's exactly where we're headed next, because the answer isn't the landfill, and it isn't a 30-a-year subscription to keep an aging machine limping along either. So let's talk about the option that most mainstream coverage still treats as a niche afterthought, when for a genuinely enormous number of people watching this, it's actually the better outcome, not just the fallback one. The distribution I'd point you toward first, and the one the overwhelming majority of the technical community still recommends for anyone coming from Windows, is Linux Mint, specifically the Cinnamon Edition. And I want to address the fear head on, because it's the thing that stops most people before they even try. Linux Mint's Cinnamon desktop puts your menu in the bottom left corner, runs a taskbar with your open applications across the bottom, keeps a system tray in the corner, and uses a file manager that behaves almost identically to Windows Explorer. When you actually boot into it for the first time, the overwhelming reaction most people have isn't "this feels foreign." It's "this feels immediately familiar." You're not relearning how to use a computer. You're just using a different one that happens to work the same way yours already does. The performance story is where this genuinely becomes compelling rather than just acceptable. A fresh Windows 11 installation typically consumes somewhere between 25 and 30 gigabytes of storage before you've installed a single application. Linux Mint, by comparison, typically uses somewhere between 8 and 12 gigabytes. On the exact generation of budget laptop that shipped with a 128 gigabyte or 256 gigabyte drive, which describes an enormous share of the Windows 10 hardware still out there right now, that storage difference alone fundamentally changes how the machine feels day to day. And because Windows 11 runs extensive background telemetry, security layers, and always-on services even while sitting idle, machines running Linux Mint on identical hardware consistently boot faster and respond more fluidly, particularly on anything from the 2015 to 2018 generation, which happens to be exactly the hardware generation. Microsoft has locked out of the official upgrade path. Here's how you actually try this without any risk to your existing setup. Go to the official Linux Mint website and download the ISO for Linux Mint 22.2, the current stable release, as of this summer, Cinnamon Edition. Use Rufus, the same free tool we just talked about, or a tool called Bellini Etcher, to flash that ISO onto a USB drive of at least 4 gigabytes. Restart your computer, boot from that USB drive, and select Start Linux Mint from the boot menu. What you get is a fully functional live environment, running entirely from the USB stick, with your existing Windows installation sitting completely untouched underneath it. You can browse the internet, check whether your Wi-Fi and audio work correctly, open documents, and browse the Software Center, all without installing anything or changing a single file on your hard drive. Only if you genuinely like what you see do you click Install. On the software question, because this is what I get asked about most and I want to answer it honestly rather than with cheerleading. LibreOffice comes included by default and handles Word, Excel, and PowerPoint files with strong day-to-day compatibility for the overwhelming majority of everyday documents. If you specifically need the full Microsoft 365 experience, the browser-based versions of Word, Excel, and PowerPoint work identically well in Firefox on Linux Mint, as they do in any browser on Windows. VLC handles media, GIMP handles photo editing, Thunderbird handles email, and the built-in Software Center lets you browse and install thousands of applications the same way you'd use an app store. No command line required for any of it. For anyone whose actual daily computing life is browsing, email, documents, video, and media, which covers a genuinely enormous share of the population, this covers everything, completely and permanently free. There's also a second option worth knowing about that's specifically designed for people whose computing life lives almost entirely inside a browser already. Chrome OS Flex, Google's answer for exactly this use case, converts an old Windows machine into something that boots in seconds and updates itself automatically and silently in the background. If your daily routine is genuinely just Gmail, Google Docs, YouTube, streaming, and social media, Chrome OS Flex turns hardware that Microsoft has declared obsolete into something that feels closer to a Chromebook than an aging PC. It's not built for power users running specialized software, and it won't replace Linux Mint for anyone who needs more flexibility, but for a specific, sizable slice of Windows 10 holdouts. It's genuinely the lowest friction transition available. I also want to spend a moment on something that gets treated as an afterthought, but genuinely shouldn't be. If even a fraction of the roughly 200 to 240 million machines currently excluded from the official Windows 11 path end up discarded simply because their owners never learned about these alternatives, that's not a minor inconvenience. That's a measurable environmental problem. Every one of those machines contains rare earth metals and materials that don't disappear cleanly in a landfill. A machine running Linux Mint 22.2 today isn't electronic waste. It's a computer with genuine years of productive, fully secure life still ahead of it, receiving complete security updates at zero ongoing cost, capable of handling nearly everything the average person actually needs a computer to do. So here's where we actually stand after walking through all three real paths. If your hardware qualifies, upgrade to Windows 11 today. Full stop, there's no reason to wait. If it doesn't, check your BIOS for a hidden TPM toggle before assuming you're locked out. If that fails, and your hardware is from roughly 2013 or later, the Rufus bypass is a genuinely tested, actively working path forward. And if none of that applies, or you'd simply rather not deal with any of Microsoft's requirements at all going forward, Linux Mint or Chrome OS Flex, turn a machine Microsoft has walked away from into one that still works perfectly for years to come. Now let's turn all of that into an actual specific plan you can execute this week, because information without action, especially after everything we just covered about this week's Patch Tuesday, is genuinely worthless. Let's turn everything we've covered into a specific step-by-step plan, because the entire point of this video falls apart if you close this tab, feel informed, and then do nothing for another 3 months. So here's exactly what to do, in order, starting today. Step 1, and this is non-negotiable, no matter which path applies to your situation. Back up your data before you touch anything else. I cannot overstate this. Before you upgrade to Windows 11, before you try the Rufus bypass, before you install Linux Mint, before you do anything at all that touches your operating system, you need a verified working backup of everything that actually matters to you, your documents, your desktop, your downloads, your photos, your videos. If you already have a Microsoft account set up, type Windows Backup into your Start menu right now and back up your files to OneDrive, which gives every account 5 gigabytes of free storage, enough to cover the critical personal files for most people. For a more complete backup that includes a full system image, get an external hard drive and use a free tool called Macrium Reflect Free, which creates a complete byte-for-byte copy of your entire system. If anything goes wrong during any transition, that system image is your undo button, and there's genuinely no excuse for skipping this step. Step 2, run PC Health Check, which we covered in detail earlier. If it comes back positive, your decision is made, go to Settings, then Windows Update, and start your free upgrade to Windows 11 today. Your files, your applications, and your settings carry over automatically. The process typically takes 30 minutes to an hour depending on your hardware. And the moment it finishes, you're fully back inside Microsoft's support ecosystem, receiving every monthly patch automatically, including whatever comes out of Patch Tuesday going forward, which, after what we just watched happen this week, is exactly where you want to be. Step 3 is for everyone whose PC Health Check came back negative. First, check your BIOS for that hidden TPM toggle we discussed, Intel PTT or AMD FTPM, before assuming the door is fully closed. If enabling it and rerunning PC Health Check still doesn't resolve things, and your machine dates to roughly 2013 or later with a processor supporting SSE 4.2. Instructions: the Rufus bypass is a legitimately tested path. Download Rufus from its official site, download the official Windows 11 ISO directly from Microsoft, flash a USB drive with a TPM secure boot, and RAM bypass options checked, boot from it, and install. Go in with your backup already completed, and treat this as a workable community-tested intermediate solution rather than an ironclad permanent guarantee, because that honest framing matters more than false confidence. Step 4 is for anyone who's reached this point and determined that neither the official upgrade nor the Rufus bypass genuinely fits their machine or their comfort level. Download the Linux Mint 22.2 Cinnamon Edition ISO from the official Linux Mint website, flash it to a USB drive of at least 4 gigabytes using Rufus or Balena Etcher, restart your machine, and boot into the live environment. Test everything: your Wi-Fi, your audio, video, your browser, LibreOffice, before committing to anything. Only when you've genuinely seen it work with your own eyes do you click install, a process that typically takes 15 to 20 minutes and is guided clearly enough for a non-technical person to follow from start to finish. Now, for anyone still tempted to simply do nothing and quietly ride out ESU coverage until October 2027 without making any real decision? I understand the appeal of that logic, genuinely. But here's the math, laid out one final time with total honesty. ESU only covers critical and important security patches. It does not include feature updates, driver support, compatibility fixes, or any technical support whatsoever. And as we covered at the top of this video, this week's Patch Tuesday alone addressed roughly 300 vulnerabilities, specifically affecting Windows 10, including 0 days that were already being actively exploited before any patch existed anywhere. If you're not enrolled, none of that protection reaches your machine, regardless of what the extended calendar says. And if you are enrolled, ESU still isn't a permanent solution. It's rented time, and eventually, in October 2027, that rental runs out too, permanently, with no announced third year on the table, as of anything Microsoft has said publicly through this week. You genuinely have more runway than the original May deadline suggested, and I want you to walk away from this video with that. Corrected, accurate understanding rather than unnecessary panic. But more runway is not the same thing as an excuse to wait. The distance between where your machine currently stands and where it needs to be, whether that's a Windows 11 upgrade, a tested Rufus installation, or a completely fresh start on Linux Mint, is genuinely closer than most coverage makes it sound, and every one of the tools required to close that gap is free, tested by millions of people, and available to you right now, today, not eventually. So here's my actual ask. Tell me in the comments exactly what your PC health check result said and what generation of hardware you're running, because I read every single comment, and I will tell you specifically which path applies to your situation. If this video actually gave you the clear, corrected picture you needed instead of just more vague urgency, hit that subscribe button because this exact story is still moving. Microsoft could shift these dates again. New vulnerabilities are getting discovered every single month, and I'll be here tracking every real update as it happens, not the recycled panic. The information exists, the tools are genuinely free, and at this point, the only variable left standing between you and a secure machine is whether you actually act on what we just covered.